Hey everyone, it's Sevi. The enigmatic Black Swan is here to start off our Penacony era as the newest addition to our DoT DPS roster. To help you understand her mysterious ways, this guide will cover her kit and traces, Eidolons, best Relic and Lightcone builds, team synergies, gameplay tips, and more. And before we begin, you can check out my guide on damage over time or DoT mechanics if you haven't yet, to familiarize yourself with its core mechanics if you'd like to. With that, let's begin.
What are you afraid of?
Black Swan's kit centers around Arcana, which is her unique DoT mechanic. As a DoT, it's considered a wind shear effect that can stack up to 50 times via her various traces and abilities. Stacking Arcana increases its base damage multiplier, as well as unlocking bonus effects if you reach a certain amount of stacks. Though note that regardless of the number of Arcana stacks she has, it will still only count as one instance of wind shear debuff effect. When Arcana finally deals damage during the enemy's turn, it resets back to 1 stack, thereby repeating the process of restacking. It's vital to understand how her kit mostly revolves around Arcana, which actually has seemingly complicated properties. Despite that, once it finally clicks, you'll realize that she's fundamentally a simple and strong DoT unit. Let's break down how it all works. Black Swan's basic attack targets one enemy with wind damage and has 2 additional effects. First, it has a 65% base chance at max level to inflict 1 Arcana stack. Second, it has another 65% base chance to inflict 1 Arcana stack if the target has wind shear, shock, bleed, or burn applied on the enemy. The key aspect is that having each DoT type on the enemy is only an individual chance of triggering this effect. Let's demonstrate it with these examples. Attacking the enemy while they have only the Arcana effect adds 2 additional Arcana stacks, which comes from the basic attack's first effect and the fact that Arcana is a wind shear effect, so it triggered the basic attack's second effect once. Now, if there's an Arcana and shock DoT on the target, then it adds 3 Arcana stacks, because there are both wind shear and shock type DoTs. But what if there's an Arcana stack and 2 other wind shear DoTs? All are considered wind shear effects, so does this mean the basic attack's second effect will trigger 3 times? Let's find out. As we can see, it only added 2 stacks, the same as the first example. This is because any number of separate DoTs that are still the same DoT type only still count as 1 chance to trigger the effect. With this, we can see having multiple DoT types is beneficial for helping stack Arcana faster. In fact, we'll see later that Black Swan has an effect that maximizes this even without the help of other DoT allies. Moving on, her skill deals blast wind damage, which has a 100% base chance of inflicting 1 Arcana stack to the main and adjacent targets, as well as a 100% base chance of applying a defense debuff on them for 3 turns. So this gives multi-target Arcana stacking utility, but more importantly, the defense shred will also be a huge help for amplifying the damage those enemies receive from any ally. When you unlock her Ascension 2 trace, using her skill to hit an enemy with wind shear, bleed, burn, or shock DoT gives a 65% base chance of inflicting an extra 1 stack of Arcana for each of those effects. Basically, it makes her skill have the same property as her basic attack, though this only affects the main target, not adjacent targets. Another method of adding Arcana stacks is in her talent. Every time the enemy takes a DoT at the start of its turn, there is a 65% base chance of inflicting them with 1 Arcana stack. In this example, the enemy has Arcana and 3 other DoTs applied. When they take their turn, they receive the 3 DoTs first, which adds 3 stacks to Arcana. When the enemy takes Arcana damage on their turn, Black Swan also triggers additional effects based on the number of Arcana stacks. If there are 3 or more Arcana stacks, adjacent enemies receive wind DoT and a 65% base chance of inflicting 1 Arcana stack on them. If there are 7 or more Arcana stacks, then the DoT has a 20% defense ignore buff on the main and adjacent targets. This makes it very valuable to stack Arcana as much as possible, ideally up to at least 7, which is consistently achievable if you utilize her other stacking conditions properly. Unlocking her Ascension 4 trace now gives Black Swan a chance to inflict an Arcana stack on an enemy entering battle. If the enemy target receives damage over time during a single attack by an ally, like when Kafka detonates a DoT with her skill or ultimate, there is a 65% base chance for the target to be inflicted with 1 Arcana stack, but this can only stack up to 3 times during one single attack. This is relevant due to how other DoT units can detonate their own DoT type effects, or Kafka, who can detonate any DoT effect. Moving on, Black Swan's ultimate deals wind damage to all enemies and inflicts the Epiphany debuff on them for 2 turns. While Epiphany Epiphany is active, enemies take more damage, but only during their turn, which makes it more synergistic with dots that trigger during enemy turns by default. However, one trick you can do here is inserting an ultimate attack during your target's turn, like when you interrupt elite or boss enemies between their turn and follow-up action. Since it's still technically their turn, the attack will actually take advantage of the Epiphany debuff too. During Epiphany, Arcana is also regarded as simultaneously being all elemental types of dots, wind shear, bleed, burn, and shock, being inflicted on the enemy. This synergizes with her basic attack as it counts all of them as 4 individual chances to stack Arcana, but it also now means other non-Kafka units can also detonate Arcana by using their abilities that allow them to detonate their own element's dot. To demonstrate, if we use Gwynaifin's ultimate, which can detonate burn dots on these enemies affected by Epiphany, she still detonates the Arcana dots on account of being also considered burn, but the damage dealt is wind type since Arcana is inherently wind damage. Then, when Arcana damage is triggered at the beginning of the enemy's next turn, Arcana stacks are not reset, but this can only be triggered one time during a single Epiphany application. That allows Arcana to stack even higher until it resets in the next turn, which other dot units can detonate for higher damage too. Her final Ascension trace is also very important as this makes her convert 60% of her effect hit rate or EHR stat into a damage bonus buff. This maxes out at a 72% damage bonus, which will require 120% EHR to hit. It's important that Black Swan's Arcana stacks and other debuffs will apply reliably, which means you need to build a lot of EHR. Thankfully, this Ascension trace allows her to double dip into building EHR. And for her technique, if you activate this before initiating a battle with any ally, then Black Swan will continuously inflict Arcana stacks at the start of battle to all enemies, but each subsequent application has a lower base chance, and this will stop when the Arcana application fails just once. Basically, it's a way to start a battle with more Arcana stacks applied. Black Swan's bonus stat traces give her attack percent, wind damage bonus, and a bit of EHR, which are all very useful to her kit and damage. For her trace leveling priority, the talent contains her Arcana multiplier, so it'll be your top priority, but her skill, ultimate, and basic attack should all be leveled up anyway as well, mainly to increase her debuff multipliers and to boost her basic attack's base chances. Since Black Swan isn't too dependent on her skill, she generally adopts a skill point positive playstyle. You want her skill to first inflict defense shred on multiple enemies, but since that lasts for 3 turns, she can spend the next few turns just doing basic attacks to stack Arcana on the main target until it's time to refresh the defense shred debuff. With this, you can generally expect a 4 to 5 turn recharge time for her ultimate. However, this can be expedited by using energy giving effects like certain light cones, allies, blessings, special battle effects, killing a lot more enemies, or getting hit by them. Black Swan is already a powerful unit at E0, but let's see what her Eidolons add to those who may want to invest more into her. With E1, enemies affected by wind shear, bleed, burn, or shock will have 25% elemental resistance reduced of those respective elements. Between E1 and her signature light cone for a dot team, you generally want to prioritize her E1 since this is team damage over personal damage, especially if you have very good alternative light cone options already. With E2, defeating an Arcana affected enemy has a chance of inflicting 6 Arcana stacks on adjacent enemies, which helps expedite Arcana stacking in multi-target scenarios. E3 increases her skill and talent levels. E4 makes Epiphany also have a 10% effect resistance reduction on enemy targets. Then at the start of their turn or when they get defeated, Black Swan regenerates 8 energy, but this can only be triggered once while Epiphany lasts. E5 increases her ultimate and basic attack levels. And with E6, when Black Swan's allies attack enemies, there's also a 65% base chance of inflicting Arcana, regardless if their attack is dot related or not. Each time Black Swan inflicts Arcana on an enemy, there is a 50% fixed chance of increasing the Arcana stacks afflicted that time by 1. This should allow her to just have insanely faster Arcana stacking capabilities to reach close to or even its upper limit. Now moving on to her Relic build, starting with her stats. Again, a very important stat goal is her effect hit rate or EHR, since we want to have a reliable application chance and to maximize her Ascension 6 trace. You'll want to reach upwards until 120% EHR to mainly accommodate for those effects with a 65% base chance versus elites and bosses with 30 to 40% effect resistance. Some rarer higher level bosses will have 40% effect resistance, which requires a higher EHR for guaranteed application, but going beyond 120% EHR is past the limit of her A6 trace, resulting in less value. In general, you can still stick to 100 to 120% EHR since that still results in a very high real chance. Anyway, let's go to her main stats. For her body piece, consider EHR first if you need to hit a higher EHR target with her. However, if you already have a lot from other sources like her light cone, relic substats, or effects, then go for attack percent instead. For the feat piece, speed is your general default option for faster turn cycling, but attack is also a viable option if you're particularly getting a lot of speed sources elsewhere. For the planar sphere, wind damage or attack can end up being marginally better than the other depending on how much of the other stat she's getting from external buffs. Remember as well that she innately gets a lot of damage bonus already too thanks to her A6 trace, so attack still has a lot of value. It's mainly going to be a substat game as well. Then for the link rope, you'll want attack percent. For the substat priority, get EHR until you reach 120% and just stack as many attack and speed rolls as you can get. Then for sets, the 4-piece prisoner in deep confinement has a very significant defense ignore effect, which gives it a considerable boost over 2-piece sets, so this is her best set. It's efficient to farm anyway since it's also best for other DoT teammates, and the 2-piece attack percent bonus is useful for many other DPSs. Otherwise, you can first go for 2-piece combos of wind damage, attack, speed, or the new Pioneer set, probably until you can farm your 4-piece prisoner. For the planar sets, the Pan Cosmic set synergizes highly with her need for EHR, and she'll easily max out its 25% attack bonus. That's a lot of stat value on her, especially if you still haven't capped her EHR target yet, but unfortunately it's paired with the Celestial Differentiator set, which is just a bad planar set to farm for, so it's bad for farming efficiency in Simulated Universe. The next general best option is the Firmament Frontline Glamoth set, which gives her attack and damage bonuses by hitting speed targets. You should probably end up with at least 135 speed anyway, and of course it's even better if you can reach 160 speed. Note that speed buffs during battle will also count. The Space Healing Station practically gives almost the same attack bonus as the Pan Cosmic set, but without the 10% EHR bonus. It's still a good option if you already have good pieces to begin with though. At the end of the day, the right main stats and substat quality are still the most important factors. Now onto her light cone options. First of all, always account for your light cone's bonuses and balance that with her other stats and what you're getting from your relics. For example, using a light cone that gives EHR allows for more flexibility to run an attack body piece instead, or a light cone that gives her a ton of damage percent bonus generally makes attack percent more valuable. Basically, your light cone can be used to supplement what you're still lacking in your relics and vice versa. Anyway, starting with her free-to-play options. Its showtime is a new Penacony Nihility Light Cone. It's mainly a damage bonus and attack stat stick, and its conditions will easily synergize with her kit. Its copies are purchasable in the Forgotten Hall shop, so it's also easy to acquire and superimpose. The limited event reward Light Cone before the tutorial mission starts is the only free-to-play Light Cone that gives EHR, so if she's still significantly lacking in EHR from her relics, this is a preferable choice. And remember, until you reach the Ascension 6 trace limit, she still converts that EHR into a damage bonus. The extra energy generation can also situationally help recharge her ult a turn earlier. Solitary Healing is the Nihility Light Cone in her to store with some considerations. It does have higher base stats than 4 stars, but its break effect will be mostly unutilized since breaking won't be Black Swan's focus, and it gives a 2-turn dot increase only after using an ultimate, so it's not really a permanent bonus unlike most other light cones. And while the extra energy mechanic can have situational usefulness like in big enemy waves, it can also be very negligible like in boss fights where you only have a few enemies to kill anyway. Moving on to gacha choices, the Eyes of the Prey also gives effect hit rate to help her reach a high EHR target and convert it into a damage bonus. The dot increase is obviously great for Black Swan as well. It's just easily a very good light cone for her. This is what I'll personally be running on her for probably most of the time, if not always, since my best relic pieces still need a lot of EHR, which my S5 copy of this provides. Good Night and Sleep Well gives a high stackable damage bonus for her depending on how many debuffs are on the target enemy, which will easily max when used in a dot team, or even a lot of other non-dot teams anyway. Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat applies a defense shred debuff by hitting enemies, and stacking this with Black Swan's defense shred is a potent team damage increase. However, it comes at the expense of her personal damage potential. Reforged Remembrance is Black Swan's signature light cone. It increases her EHR and gives her profit stacks, which are attack and defense ignore bonuses permanently for the battle. Thanks to her Epiphany effect, she can easily get the max stacks herself. With this light cone, Black Swan's source of defense ignore and reduction are just stacking higher and higher for even more potent damage. That being said, this isn't by any means a high priority pull for her, especially when she already has very good free-to-play or gacha options. Other possible 5-star alternatives are Silver Wolf's signature Incessant Incessant Rain if you already have it. Like the Resolution Shine's Light Cone, it's more for team damage utility rather than for personal damage. There's also Welt's Light Cone if you pulled it, which just mainly serves as a stat stick for base attack and a permanent damage bonus, since its triggered effect is only limited to the skill attack. Then we have Black Swan's team synergies. Black Swan's dot-oriented kit means she will clearly synergize very well in our existing dot teams with other dot allies. Her value comes not just from having high personal damage potential, but also for her debuffs that help her allies deal even more damage. Her teams are typically composed of 2 dot units, a synergistic buffer, and a sustain support, though variations like having 3 dot units are also an option. Kafka is of course going to be her general best teammate. No surprise there anymore. Kafka detonates all types of dots, and that'll help with stacking Arcana higher and higher. If she's fast enough, Kafka can detonate it multiple times for increasing Arcana damage before the enemy takes their turn, or when combined with Black Swan's Epiphany to delay the reset. And if you've vertically invested in Kafka with her Eidolons, which give dot-related boosts for the team, then Black Swan will benefit from those as well. However, non-Kafka dot teams can also still be very good in the right scenarios. Sampo can be a great dot pair with her, particularly when you have his E4 and are up against wind-weak enemies. His E4 allows his skill to detonate a portion of the original damage of any wind shear type dots as long as there are 5 wind shear stacks in an enemy. And since Arcana is also considered as wind shear, Sampo will detonate hers as well, and their combined wind toughness damage can result in fast breaking for wind weaknesses, which further adds to the wind shear break Sampo can detonate. Otherwise, others like Luca or Guanaifen versus physical and fire-weak enemies respectively will also have their advantages. For supports, you ideally want a support that can buff both your dot units. Very exceptional choices are of course Runmei for her very strong team-wide buffs and break extension, which complements dots, and Huohuo, who's a very comfortable sustain, battery, and most importantly also a team-wide attack buffer. Some honorable mentions are still Asta for her team-wide attack and speed buffs, which can potentially help you get in faster dot detonations and Arcana stacking, and Nihility Defense Shredders Silverwolf and Pela in single and multi-target scenarios respectively. Some Harmony units like Tingyun, Hanya, and Bronya have more single-target focused support utilities, or a combination of team-wide and single-target buffs, but they can be made to work, like using Tingyun to battery Kafka or Black Swan, or advancing Kafka forward with Bronya for succeeding skill detonations. Your sustains will generally depend on what you have, with 5 stars having more utility and comfort. One synergy to take advantage of with preservation units can be by using the trend of the Universal Market Light Cone, which can inflict burn on enemies that hit the wearer. That's another dot source you can add to help with Arcana stacking. Now, Black Swan does have some functionality outside of dot teams, though obviously it won't maximize her true potential. Her Defense Shred is still useful for amplifying your team's damage, her effects are counted as debuffs for any debuff-dependent abilities, and when your Epiphany state is active to make Arcana considered as all dot types, that can help activate abilities that require a specific type of dot active on the character, like Himiko's A4 Trace that gives her a damage bonus against burn-affected enemies. She can also be an SP generator by using her skill to apply the Defense Shred and just using basic attacks for the most part. However, Arcana will stack noticeably slower if Black Swan is the only dot unit on the team, since you're not applying other dot types or detonating dots to help stack them faster. The exception is some units that have minor dot application capabilities in their kit, but dot detonation for now is strictly limited to dot units themselves. When it comes to her auto battle, I mainly observed her in dot teams, particularly her Premium Kafka team and a Sampo Duo team. As expected, the biggest issue is always the AI's SP management of the team, but if the team is well built with enough survivability, even high Forgotten Hall or MOC floors and difficult simulated universe content can generally be finished in auto. However, I did catch some unfavorable behaviors that exacerbated the SP usage and resulted in less optimal damage output. There are times where she used her skill in consecutive turns, even if the main target still had a long duration for the defense debuff. It might likely be due to either an adjacent enemy not having the defense debuff applied yet, or just because the AI is trying to maximize Arcana stacking. While that does have small benefits like energy gain and multi-target stacking, it can also be quite inefficient in many cases when you can just use her basic attack to stack Arcana on a more important target. This reduces her SP positive potential, and the worst consequence is how it can potentially have a domino effect on the AI's already poor team SP management to begin with. I also noticed that she sometimes uses her skill on a corner enemy when it's obviously better to at least move to a more central target so that another enemy can be inflicted with a defense debuff. It's still more often that she did apply her skill to the elite enemy at least, so this isn't a consistent issue. Other scenarios and factors can affect the auto behavior or make it less viable for clearing, and of course future updates might also make adjustments or improvements to her auto behavior. And that's it for this Black Swan guide. Let me know in the comments if you're a DoT enthusiast adding her to your collection, or maybe she'll be the one to convert you to the DoT life. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!